3 times people believe some stupid stuff. The Great Children's Crusade of 1212. In the year 1212, an army of children, 1,000 strong, set off to retake Jerusalem with nothing but faith as their weapon. The tale starts off in France, where a 12-year-old shepherd boy named Stephen of Cloyes claimed to have a letter from Jesus himself, meant for the French king. In the streets of France, he began to preach, and soon a massive following of young people, and not just children, but adolescents and the poor, gathered around him. Their goal: to march to the Holy Land and peacefully convert Muslims to Christianity. Stephen's charisma was undeniable. Having convinced 30,000 people to follow him on his crusade, he led his followers south, believing that the Mediterranean Sea would part for them just as the Red Sea did for Moses. But when they reached the coast, the sea remained stubbornly, well, a sea. The French king, unimpressed, gave orders for the crowd to go home. Meanwhile, in the Rhineland region of Germany, a similar movement was brewing, this one led by another 12-year-old boy named Nicholas of Cologne. Nicholas also preached a message of divine inspiration, promising that God would clear a path to the Holy Land. His following was even larger and more diverse than Stephen's, a mix of young people, entire families, and the destitute, all swept up in a wave of religious enthusiasm. But their journey was far more perilous. To reach the sea, Nicholas and his followers had to cross the treacherous Alps. Many succumbed to starvation and exhaustion on the brutal trek. When the survivors finally reached Genoa, Italy, the sea once again did not part. Some of the group continued on to Pisa, where they boarded ships hoping to sail to the Holy Land. This crusade was not sanctioned by the Pope, and many did not have much faith in the chances of a group of children marching across land and sea to peacefully convince entire nations to convert to their faith. But this did not stop Nicholas and his followers, using their vast knowledge and experience in navigation, sailing, and diplomacy. The ragtag band sailed across the sea and convinced the then ruler Al-Malik al-Ashraf to convert all his kingdoms over to Christianity. Just kidding, some of the ships got shipwrecked at sea, and those that survived were either unalived or sold off into slavery. The French king would later remark, the whole thing was a rather childish attempt. The cargo cult. The jungle had always provided coconuts for drink, taro for the belly, and the spirits of the ancestors for guidance. But then came the great metal birds, roaring through the sky, louder than any storm. They landed not with the grace of a seabird, but with a ground-shaking thud on a scar of red earth carved from the heart of their island. From the bellies of these birds came men with skin the color of bleached coral. They were not spirits, not exactly. They sweated in the sun and bled when cut. But they possessed magic. With them came the cargo. Crates of sweet-smelling meat in metal skins. Rivers of dark, bubbling water that fizzed on the tongue, and fabric smoother than the finest tapa cloth. They had tools that screamed and felled trees in minutes, and lights that outshone the moon. For a time, the village shared in this abundance. The strange men, the Americans, were generous. Life, for a fleeting moment, was a dream of plenty. The old ways, the hard-earned sustenance, seemed foolish in the face of such effortless wealth. Then, as suddenly as they had arrived, the metal bird swallowed the men and the cargo and flew into the sun, leaving only silence and a runway of packed earth. The dream was over. The jungle, once a provider, now seemed empty, its gifts mundane. Confusion turned to longing, and longing to a new kind of faith. The elders watched how the Americans had summoned their magic. They had marched in strange rhythmic patterns, hoisting sticks to their shoulders. They had spoken into wires and sat in tall wooden towers, gazing at the sky. So the people began to imitate. They carved wooden rifles and marched in the dawn mist, their feet stamping the sacred ground of the abandoned airstrip. They fashioned headphones from coconut shells and vines, sitting in bamboo control towers, whispering pleas into the wind. They lit torches along the runway at night, a beacon for the metal birds they believed would return. They worshipped the idea of the cargo, a faith born from the bewildering generosity of strangers and the aching void they left behind. Theirs was a new religion, the cult of the cargo, a testament to a world forever changed by a brief, baffling encounter with another. Jeff Bezos has been trying his best to start a similar cargo cult. The war on cats. A bacteria called Yersinia pestis had hitchhiked a ride on a flea, and that flea hitchhiked a ride on a rat, and this rat hitchhiked a ride on a merchant ship. And so it would be that in 1346, horror arrived on merchant ships in Europe. Quickly, a new unknown disease ravaged the lands, killing en masse as it spread across Europe. It's important to remember that people in the 14th century Europe did not have Google or AI to ask for information. They had kings, wizards, legends, and books. So, in all their splendor and ingenuity, they arrived at a conclusion that it must be the work of the devil, and in what must be one of the greatest face palms of human history, decided to cull en masse none other than the servants of those nasty devilish folks, the cats. Across the continent, in scattered fits of piety and panic, a cull began. It wasn't an organized campaign, but a grassroots war waged in alleys and farmyards. Mobs armed with clubs and stones hunted the very creatures that kept the vermin in check. The grim irony was lost on everyone, as the soft purrs and padded footsteps vanished from the cobblestone streets. A different sound grew bolder in the sudden silence. It was the rustle and scuttling from within the walls, the barns, and the overflowing granaries. The rat population, freed from one of its most effective predators, exploded. Each rat was a vessel carrying the plague's true agent, the flea. In their frantic attempt to purge a supernatural foe, the people of medieval Europe had unwittingly protected the plague's most valuable ally. They had hunted the shadow, and in doing so, allowed the substance of the disease to flourish, ensuring the death carts would remain full for years to come. The Black Death ended up killing around 50% of Europe's population at the time. When asked by reporters after the fact, Ratatouille would state that this video is a propaganda hit piece, sponsored by big cats, the true cause of the Black Death and all other bad things in the world.